Stanisław Barszczak, In Search of a Way Out of Human Anxiety. When God suddenly stands before you. This is chat by the fireplace. Does God exist? Is there a God? Is there any evidence of his existence? And ahead of us is a great moment of philosophy. We can ask different questions. Again, we can move freely in thought and around the globe. A big question to start with. Most philosophers today are atheists. Otherwise, the Berlin philosopher and science philosopher Holm Tettens, who rediscovered faith in God, and his colleague Philipp Hebel, believes there are no good reason for this. Evidence for God's existence has a long tradition in philosophy, but it does not convince unbelievers. Perhaps it is because God cannot be proved, but is it worth believing in then? I absolutely mean those who understand God as a higher power that gives meaning to our lives. But is God just a consolation or imagination? Not necessarily, because even the non-existence of God cannot be proved. So why not believe in him? Are people really rational? The question. Be it a fairy tale, a utopia, or conspiracy, stories shape our understanding of the world. Recent research has even heralded a revolution in the image of man, from Homo sapiens to Homo narrans, a rational or narrative man, telling himself what the consequences of this. Which narrative do you no longer hear? Does fiction beat reality? Can positive stories make war? Like between Russia and Ukraine? Are women to blame for everything? Another question. What do the Brothers Grimm fairy tales have to do with conspiracy theories? Interpretation of the war in Ukraine with the Old Testament? Appeals for the ecological transformation with utopian literature? These are addictive stories. As the latest research shows, people are first and foremost narrative beings. They understand the world in stories and through stories. But what is the source of the basic human fascination with narrative? What are the evolutionary benefits? What dangers and political shocks? Conspiracy theories and fake news show that the stories that mobilize the masses do not necessarily have to be factual. Is every story just a fiction? Columnist Samira El-Ouasil and cognitive scientist Fritz Breithaupt, in an interview with Wolfram Eilenberger on narrative ideal of enlightened society. You may read this very interesting discussion through internet. Gerhard Roth, another big thinker of today. Who makes our decision? Free will is an illusion, and the soul is only a product of the brain. These are the theses of the famous brain researcher and philosopher that shakes our image of man. And Yves Brossard tells him about our freedom, our consciousness, and man as a piece of nature. Beautiful. And for example, Polish thinker Michał Heller said about the man as a mathematician, but God is not mathematician, is mathematic. And our story, our thinking is very important in order to construct the universe of today, etc., and so on. Gerhard Roth is a brain researcher, as I said, philosopher, and professor at the University of Bremen. For decades, it has dealt with the great questions of humanity from a neuroscientific point of view. How are we really free? What is the relationship between the brain and mind? Why am I the way I am? In his current book about man, the influential researcher summarizes and calls for a new image of the human being, with consequences for criminal law as well as for psychiatry and education. Yves Bossard talks to a militant thinker about his image of a human being and its consequences. I said, spirit, Geist, rules over human neurons. In German language, Gehirn und Geist. The latter, the mind, is the essential form of the brain. And another notion, Wesen in German language, as the essence of the nerves or the essence of the movement of neurons, is still an unknown status till today in the psychiatry. There are no more neurons from our youth, I believe, around us in our lives, which every stress our neural envelopes burst, and the existing little network of neurons in the human brain will always be based on the Geist. I believe thus the most depend on how the connection between the brain and the mind is realized. Here are other questions. What is the secret behind the Temple Mount in Jerusalem? New excavation. There are many archaeologists in the old city of Jerusalem to look for the new new artifacts from the first temple of Jerusalem, of Temple of Solomon. Eckhart von Hirschhausen takes us into the miraculous power of thought. Am I my brain? David Chalmers talks about awareness. Did God create the world? Harald Lesch is charmed by technology. Philosopher, cosmologist of contemporary physicists from Jung. And he said, he reveals a fascinating universe to us. And after asking him the question, is there a God? He points for the photo to the Pope Francis photo. Yuval Harari, Jews, tells the story of tomorrow. Is there a God? This question has occupied the greatest thinkers for millennia. Either God exists or he doesn't. Actually, it's simple matter. And yet there is no bigger, deeper mystery. Of course, Christians will answer yes and atheists will not. But no one has absolute proof. We can neither prove nor disprove the existence of God. While some believe in God because they cannot imagine that this gigantic universe was created by chance, others believe that the nature is more likely to arise out of nothing without a cause. But in the construction of the universe, we are finding harmony. At the end of our lives on earth, we look for the harmony of our life. The atheist demand the priest at the end of his life on earth. We ask ourselves this question: are there any tips that might partially answer this question? We get to the bottom of the scientific fact. The universe, first of all, famous physicists, their opinions could not more different than those statements that fit the common cliché. You believe only in science, not in God. On the other hand, there are many scientists who believe in God. They declared atheists, for example, Stephen Hawking, 4 years ago he died, mentioned writes in his famous book Brief History of Time that the existence of God cannot be ruled out, for because looking at the universe one cannot exclude the existence of God. I can only believe in one creator again and again. Quote ends. Richard Dawkins, atheist, has written a book on why there is almost certainly there is no God. But the classic physicist Albert Einstein has once spoken in an interview about why there is no certainty of God. My greatest concern is the truth, because I want to know whether or not God exists. So this should also be his anomaly. A worry because there is only one truth. Let us look at the different viewpoints. First, nature arose by itself without cause and without the point of view of divine origin, that is, the divine position about the beginning of the universe. Second, the universe was created and our world was not created by a cosmic accident, and the natural constant in the cosmos are unchanging. Universal fundamental natural constants, including the speed of light, the gravitational constant, are the principles of physics. If our universe had only slightly different physical properties, life would not be possible. The cosmos would probably not exist anymore, so for organic life to exist, fundamental and constant laws must lie within extremely narrow tolerance limits. If the gravitational constant would only deviate by a few billions, the universe would collapse a long time ago. The expansion would have been so strong that stars and galaxies would never have been able to form. And if the so-called fine permanent structure, which is of great importance in chemistry, had only a slightly different value, the carbon molecules would never bind the basic building blocks of any life form, and so on. God's Son, Jesus, once said, "The Spirit gives life. The spirit of this world, Geist, in German language, is guided by those who want to take away from us what they promise: wisdom, freedom, love, and joy. But the Spirit of Jesus protects us from external threats and from our own weakness. It is a spirit of realism that teaches us to choose the path of blessing and live in a world where many choose the path of curse and death. Do you want to live by the Spirit that is Jesus God, in this world? In the third millennium, God's mind is Spirit. In German, Geist. So if you want to meet Him now, say this prayer: Jesus, I come to you now. Let me see the truth, and not only with the mind, but also with the heart. Please come into my life and forgive me my debt. I want to thank you for death and resurrection for me. Fill my heart with your wisdom. Thank you for loving me. Please come. Amen. Here is mine and your new beginning. When you say this prayer from your heart, you have a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Pray and talk to God every day. Read the Bible to get to know Jesus Christ better. Find contact with other Christians so that you can continue to grow in your faith. Tell your neighbors about Jesus and what he has done for us, because remember that life here on earth will end one day and eternity will begin.